When it comes to choosing a broker to start investing, Interactive Brokers always comes up as an option. And that's why today I'm going to tell you everything they don't tell you about investing in Interactive Brokers. And finally, a conclusion on whether it's worth investing in this platform or not. So let's get started right away without further ado and start with the advantages that make this broker unique. And we definitely have to start with the positives. I'll tell you about the disadvantages and the downsides later, but we need to look at both sides of the issue. The first big advantage, and possibly the most important compared to other brokers, is the financial strength that this broker has. Interactive Brokers is not just another broker, as it is listed on the NASDAQ under the symbol IBKR, which means it is subject to constant audits and must maintain maximum transparency. This is clearly not a minor detail when we talk about trusting all our money to a platform. But what really makes Interactive Brokers stand out, and is highlighted by many, is its global reach. We are talking about having access to more than 150 markets in 30 years. Different countries, all within the same platform. Do you want to buy shares on the Tokyo Stock Exchange or maybe ETFs that are listed in London with Interactive Brokers? You can do it all from one account on the same platform. It's like having an all-in-one, and watch out here, because you're probably thinking, of course. But why would I want to invest in all those markets and countries if I'm only interested in, say, the US market? But believe me, when you start to dig a little deeper and see opportunities in other markets, you'll wish you had started with a broker like this, which will let you invest in just about anywhere in the world. Now let's talk about another aspect that few mention, which is their stock lending system. If you have shares in your Interactive portfolio, brokers can lend them to other investors and you receive a portion of the interest. It's like, for example, having additional passive income from the stocks you already own. And we cannot forget the issue of investor protection, since your assets are segregated. That is, they do not match the accounts that the broker itself has. That is, the money generated by the broker and the money that is the broker's own is kept in a separate account as his company. But the income or the money from the people investing within Interactive Brokers is kept in separate accounts, meaning they don't have access to that money. And on top of that, this money is protected up to $500,000 through the SIPC in the United States, and they have additional protections in other countries. Let's also say that for more advanced users, its Trader, Workstation, or TWS platform stands out, which, although it may seem complex at first, is one of the most powerful on the market. It includes tools for technical analysis, fundamentals, screeners, and pretty much any function a professional investor might need. But perhaps one of the most interesting advantages that few people know about is that you can open a practice account with virtual money. And this will allow you to familiarize yourself with the platform and test strategies without risking your capital. And once you're confident, you can start investing your own money. But alright, now let's move on to talk about the downsides, because not everything can be perfect. Not everything can be the best. Let's start with this part that many don't want to tell you when they talk about this platform. The first one, and probably the most frustrating for many, is the complexity of their platform, which at the same time is both an advantage and a disadvantage. Let's not kid ourselves. Interactive Brokers wasn't designed with beginners in mind. Its interface can be overwhelming, even for people with investment experience. So, as I was saying, this can be an advantage for those who need very advanced tools, but a disadvantage for people who are just starting out in the investment world and don't know how to navigate it. But in the long run, too, this is something quite similar to what I was telling you about. Having access to many markets that you might not really need at first. It could be that you don't need all these tools initially, but maybe in the future you will. So it's much better to have it from the start, or at least that's what I think. Another critical point is the language issue, especially for Latin Americans or Spanish speakers. Directly, because, yes, they have a Spanish version, but we have to be honest. The translation seems like it was done by a robot. Literally, the translation of the Interactive Brokers page into Spanish isn't exactly the best. However, well, later we could talk about possible solutions to this. And if you don't feel comfortable browsing in English, this can be a real pain. Now let's talk about minimum commissions, because here's something that not everyone tells you. And if you're planning to make small investments, say, of $100 or less, the minimum commissions can really eat into your profits. For example, if you pay a minimum commission of $2 or $3 per trade on a $100 investment, you are losing 2 to 3% in commissions alone. And this clearly doesn't sound so attractive. Now, another disadvantage is that the account opening process is something that deserves special mention among these downsides, as you need to be prepared from the start to send a marathon of forms and documentation. And it's not that it's impossible, but compared to other brokers, let's just say the registration process is a bit more time-consuming. And questions. And it is not that it is impossible, but compared to other brokers, let's say that the registration process is a little slower. You have to send more documentation, and it's going to take you a bit longer compared to, as I mentioned, other platforms. Now, deposits and withdrawals can also be a headache, especially if you are in Latin America, while in the United States and Europe it is quite straightforward. In our countries, it can become a longer and more expensive process. However, there are alternatives, and in fact, we have them on this channel. For example, applications that allow you to have a bank account in the United States and send money directly from countries in Latin America. You can look for that content on my channel, or you can just let me know in the comments, and I'll send you the link. Speaking of this, I not only like to focus on the topic of the problems, but I also like to speak from the point of view of how can we do that? Speaking about the subject of commissions that we talked about earlier, the definitive strategy is that if, for example, you want to put money into Interactive Brokers, do it. But before investing, accumulate a sufficient amount of capital so that the commission they charge you does not mean too much. Then, regarding the complexity of the platform, it is simply a matter of starting, that is, starting to use it. Starting to get the most out of it, and from there, well, you can start learning, and then, well, you can take advantage of this. Then, when it comes to the language issue, I really recommend that you stick with the English version. Don't change it even if you don't know English. Use translators, use Google Translate, and as time goes by, it's going to get a lot better because the vast majority of investment terms are in English, then you'll understand it better. Then I had already mentioned the topic of deposits and withdrawals, which really, as I said, there are apps in this sector. There are alternatives to have bank accounts, for example, in the U.S. and make shipments in a much more faster and easier, skipping this step of traditional banks, which can sometimes be pretty expensive for sending money to the U.S. Now we're going to answer the ultimate question from the title of this video, and the question is it worth it? Interactive Brokers. The answer is, as almost always, it depends. From your profile as an investor, for example, if you're a beginner investor just starting out with small amounts, let's say less than $1,000, there are probably better options in the market. There could also be more user-friendly brokers with Spanish interfaces, well translated and without minimum commissions, suitable for you at this stage. But if you already consider yourself an intermediate or advanced investor, or if you are not necessarily one at this time, but if you are one of those who plans to trade larger amounts in the future and is looking for global access to many markets, Interactive Brokers is probably one to consider. Of the best options available, I would sum up Interactive Brokers in one phrase. It's basically like having a Ferrari. It's not the best car to learn how to drive, but it's unbeatable when you know what you're doing.